everybody. Welcome to the SoxProspects.com podcast. We are the web's number one source for information on the Boston Red Sox farm system from top to bottom, from Fort Myers to Pawtucket, and all stops in between. Thank you for listening. My name is Chris Hatfield. I'm the executive editor of SoxProspects.com, and I am joined, as always, by a buffer of at least 6 feet, by our director of scouting, Ian Kundle. Ian, it's a good thing we always record this by video conference anyway. I feel like I'm talking with everyone by video conference now, and this is just kind of more of the same. I guess I was just kind of already used to it, so I had practice.
Yeah, so
thank you.
It's a very different world we're living in right now.
Yeah.
It's been an interesting couple of weeks.
We recorded a podcast 2 weeks ago.
It is, right. So a lot's changed.
2.5 weeks ago.
It feels like it's been like a year.
Yeah.
Like time is going very slow right now.
I wake up in the morning and I don't know what day it is. It's bad.
Like I bought a basketball hoop just to like change things up. Like I'm like losing my mind here. So I was like, I have a driveway. I'm buying a basketball hoop because.
How long are you going to leave the box in your driveway to decontaminate?
I don't know. Yeah. It's not built yet.
No joke.
I build it. Yeah. I don't know. But I was kind of just thinking of things I enjoy doing to kind of change it up.
That's true.
And I like shooting hoops, and I still play basketball like regularly, as you know, and obviously that's on hold for a long time.
Mess around and get a triple double.
Yeah. So I just was like, I'm going to buy a basketball hoop, and I did. And
all right.
I didn't really think about the building it part because I'm not exactly the most adept with tools. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I have that.
Is it like, does it have a base?
Yeah, it's like a 10-foot hoop.
Okay. Right.
It's like regulation size. But it has one of those.
Yes, I know. I'm just saying, are you putting it on the side of the house?
No. It's like one of the ones you put water in, like the base or sandbags or whatever. But yeah, so that's kind of like, that's one of the things I'm doing to try and stay, relatively normal, trying to get outside as much as possible within reason, obviously. A little disappointing. Not disappointing. It's obviously necessary. They closed all like the parks and everything around me. So,
well, it's funny. I'm kind of disappointed because while we were talking before we started recording, DC issued a stay-at-home order.
Yeah.
And I got the world is ending siren on my phone.
It's not a fun siren to hear.
It's not fun, but it would have been the effect of having it happen while we were recording.
Yeah,
would have been tremendous.
But that's all going on, and then kind of looming in the background, obviously, as we talked about the last episode about spring training, that got put on hold. We had to cancel our trip down there, which I'm glad we did because they weren't doing anything anyway when we would have gone. Mm-hmm. But now we've kind of reached this point where I think people have realized that baseball is going to be on hold for a while, and it's we're in uncharted territory. This isn't something the CBA or the players or the owners or even MLB probably had thought was something they'd ever have to plan for. And here we are. And I think it's left a situation where what is going to happen is going to be fascinating because the way baseball is played and kind of the schedule we were used to has been completely upended, and we're going into uncharted territory here. Like, I don't know what's going to happen, when it's going to come back, if it comes back this year, what's going to happen with the amateur draft, what happens with, player salaries. There's just so many questions. And I think, there's a lot to talk about with regards to that.
Yeah. And that's going to be the focus of this episode. We've been getting a lot of questions on Twitter. The best is when we get the questions on Twitter, Ian, that are asking us like we know. Nobody knows. They're literally negotiating that right now. That's what's happening. No. Yeah.
We're starting to finally get some leaks, I feel like, but it's pretty clear, you'll have which one, the two sides seem to be more or less getting on the same page, but it still leaves some really big questions unanswered. The biggest one obviously being when or is the season going to get started?
Yeah. Whether or not there's a season is kind of the threshold question.
Yeah. Because I think a lot depends on that.
Yeah, because if there is no season, the questions become very, very different.
Yes.
So we're going to go from there.
Yeah, so that's kind of, I think, what we're going to lay out is this week, since we haven't really talked about it since everything broke, this is going to be our discussion of that, and then go from there.
Well, and the thing, too, is we, just to clue everybody in, our plan is to continue recording the podcast. We have a lot of things that we get asked that we're basically look, we don't have time to figure that out. We've got some ideas for potentially interviews we're going to try and get. We may not get any of them, so I'm not going to promise anything. I haven't reached out to anyone yet, but I'm thinking this may or may not be a good time to try and talk to some people that would be good to talk to. We've got some content that we're preparing for the news page that could lead to discussion here. And so we're going to keep going.
It's just where we reached a point where without games to talk about or spring training to talk about, there's a lot of things we've floated in the background about doing at this time of year. And just for whatever reason, we haven't been able to get to them. And now without games, we don't have that commitment or anything. So
we could take some deep dives on things that we don't have time to because things are happening that we need to respond to. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So that it could lead to some really interesting episodes, at least that we hope you guys feel that way. But we're really not looking forward to not having baseball, but we're looking forward to the things that we're going to be able to talk about here. So make sure you stay tuned. Just keep an eye on the feed wherever you listen, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play Music, YouTube, wherever. Keep it here because we're not going away. By any stretch of the imagination. If anything, we were talking about this the other day too. We have this time that's normally wasted on things like commuting that we now have back. So maybe we have more time to do more podcasts. So that'll be good. As always, we want to shout out our $5 level Patreon supporters. You can support us at patreon.com/smallprospects. Jesus, Sox prospects.
Excuse me? Start that. Going to say that again?
Patreon.com/Sox prospects. I was thinking small business.
Gotcha.
We're sort of small prospects.
Yeah, I don't know what you were thinking. Let's continue. We don't want to go too
Dustin
long.
Pedroia, Jose Altuve. Andrew Benintendi. We want to give a shout out to our $5 level supporters. They include Kyle Costigan, Tyler Woodrow, Jeff Trainer, David Nardone, Tim Harding, Bill Stanton, Deb Kendall, Evan Kirkwood, Hurricanes 1, Chris Fox, James O'Hara, Nathan Kenyon, Andrew Wallen, David B., Ben Burnett, Al Mendel, Kevin Catrides, Ben and R.I., Gerardo Ian Tosca, Paul Denyer, Lendell Martin, and our newest $5 level Patreon supporter, Cassandra Bukta. Thank you all for your support. We appreciate it. And of course, we want to send our thanks to everyone who sent us emails for this episode. Now more than ever, we need your emails. Preferably about topics we didn't talk about in the previous episode. Make sure you send those to podcast@soxprospects.com. The email is a much better way to get your question in than Twitter. Send the email. We will get to it if you send us an email. No promises if you tweet at us. So send the email. It's podcast@soxprospects.com. And plus, if you tweet at us, I usually just assume you want an answer on Twitter, not on the podcast. So, send us your emails. We've got a bunch today. We want more. If you're thinking of something as you're listening, hit pause, send the email, resume. We're really looking forward to getting some good discussion on things that you guys want to know that maybe we would not, like I said, that we wouldn't otherwise necessarily get to. So send those in. We appreciate it. Ian, where on earth do you want to start? Because I
think labor negotiations is probably what we should talk about.
Yeah. So, let's start with, we've been getting a lot of the questions of like, what happens with, player contracts? What happens with the draft? What happens with that? As Ian said, there's no plan. They don't have a plan for if there is no season because of a global pandemic.
Yeah.
That's not a thing. The only thing in the CBA is there's a clause that I think it's in the CBA and in uniform employee contracts that say that in the case of a national emergency, the commissioner has the power to basically suspend payment of those employees, including players. I believe scouts are included as well. I would presume, on-field coaching staff. I would presume that includes baseball side of the front office, player dev, baseball ops, all scouting, etc. So I presume that would be the case for all those people. Manfred has not done that here. And in fact, with the way the negotiation is going and the way the teams have acted, that is not going to happen, full stop. But there are negotiations happening. So let's get into that. I think a good place to start, Ian, as you pointed out when we were preparing, is the Jeff Passan report from this morning. It's Jeff Passan and Kylie McDaniel.
On ESPN, yeah.
On ESPN.com, and it's you should go read it yourself. I highly recommend it. It's great.
Well, now I don't think it's behind a paywall either.
It's
like
not.
The other one we're going to discuss.
Not.
So yeah.
The one I'm looking at doesn't appear to be behind a paywall.
That's what I mean. Versus the Athletic one, you have to be a subscriber to the Athletic, I believe.
Oh,
so
okay, yeah.
That's my point. So
right,
if you're interested, you can check out the ESPN one.
Okay, so yeah, the items that are covered in the Passan McDaniel article, just kind of going down the line here. Start to the season. It looks like July might be when the season would start if there is a 2020 season. Late June, early July, the earliest. I think that sounds right with everything we've heard, Ian.
Well, I think the complicating factor is, unlike, I feel like some of the other sports like basketball, the ones that were in season, baseball never even ramped up fully.
Right.
So the players, it's not like, the players can just go back.
Training.
They're going to need a couple weeks, 2, 3 weeks at least, to kind of ramp back up into game speed. And so, let's say that, let's see, if everything's cleared by like mid-May, they get the go ahead, or June, they still need that more or less that entire month to get going. So yeah, that's kind of one of the more difficult factors that baseball is going to have in play, is that kind of situation that spring training was never finished.
I mean, can you imagine the oblique, hamstring, elbow, and shoulder injuries if they went straight into the regular season?
Oh, I mean, if I was a player, I would refuse to.
Horrible.
Like, you can't. Yeah. Well, that's why I think even if they do that, this is another thing I'm sure we'll get to, they're going to have to increase the active roster.
Yeah, they're going to have, they have to go to 28.
I don't see any way around it if they play, and they're going to have to go to, who knows, maybe even like 28, 30.
I would say 28 probably. If you're planning on going to 28 in September,
you might as well just go 28 the entire season.
Might as well just go 28 the whole year.
Just because, especially with what they're talking about, I mean, the rumors are they still want to play as many games as possible. And I believe Ken Rosenthal had.
The players have said that they're willing to play like multiple doubleheaders a week.
Yeah,
to make up the games.
So that would, if you're going to do that, you're going to need multiple extra pitchers. It creates a whole new roster dynamic, and frankly, something the Red Sox might actually be in reasonably good shape to handle, given how many pitchers they have on their 40-man roster.
I know.
I just thought of that, but yeah, I mean, they're going to have to just change like the active roster requirements. I don't see any way around that.
Yep, they're considering games in front of no fans. I mean, consider the point you made, Ian. The Mets and Yankees are not playing in New York.
I don't think the Mariners are
anytime soon.
And neither the Mariners or Seattle, same thing.
Like, they're just...
It's just not, you can't have the commitment it would take from like emergency vehicles and like police officers and everything having to worry about those games. They're needed in other areas right now, and probably still, and unfortunately will likely still be needed there if the season, it comes summer.
Even just because you're sending players into a hot zone.
Well, that also, but yeah,
it's just that alone.
Just logistically, I just don't see how it would have to be neutral sites or all road games, or who knows what it would be. But yeah,
right, exactly. So I mean, you'd have that. You could have games at parks with no fans. They're kind of discussing what would have to happen then. A short spring training, which we talked about.
Yeah, well, you're seeing though, like the KBO is doing that right now. I believe they're playing games with no fans.
Yeah.
They're in their preseason. I believe it's their spring
they're starting their spring training. Yeah,
but their games are with no fans, and it's a very interesting atmosphere. I was watching a little bit of one a couple days ago.
Yeah,
just the no fans.
Well, there was the Baltimore game that was in 2015.
I remember that. Yeah, right after the
rioting. Yeah, which I remember. I mean, I was on my honeymoon when that was happening, and it was just bizarre. Watching the highlights. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. Another point is that teams might have a transaction freeze if an agreement is reached between now and like the spring training.
Which I think makes sense. My theory is that that's something the players want in order to just basically ensure that teams don't just start dropping kind of the back end of the roster guys in order to not have to worry about paying them maybe. That was my only thing I could think of.
Yeah, but then there's players who are free agents right now who I'm sure would like to have a job.
Yeah, so that's, I don't know. Like it's a good point. I don't know which side would be pushing that. That's a good question.
Clay Buchholz is getting snapped up.
Or like Yasiel Puig, like guys like that. Yeah.
Well, and the Red Sox, as we just learned moments before we recorded, the Red Sox just signed Yero Munoz, who used late of the Cardinals.
Do they have a 40-man roster spot, actually?
They gave him a minor league contract.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, they gave him a minor league contract. And it's probably just like, look, we don't want to make a 40-man spot, but we'll sign you to a minor league contract and you can come compete for the second base job.
Yeah, it's like a depth thing. And because for those who don't know, he was with the Cardinals, played a decent amount in the big leagues last year. And then
2 years ago, he played more. And last year, he only got like 130 at bats.
Yeah, but then he walked away from spring training this year.
Like left without telling
mysterious reasons. I was looking up an article and like the rumor was maybe it had to do with like playing time or something, but nothing was ever confirmed. So we don't really know why he walked away.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
It's like that movie Sugar.
I don't know that movie.
You should watch it. It's good.
But anyway,
until the last third of it. Anyway. Yeah. And then the last thing, and this is really the major thing, is changes to the arbitration system. Service time is really the big deal here. Mm-hmm. That's the system that, service time is the system that you're under team control for the first 6 years of your career.
Yeah.
Based on service time. So if you are only up for half a year each of your first couple of seasons, that's 7 years. What happens with an abbreviated season?
Well, it seems like, and thankfully, I think this is would have, in my opinion, would have been the most contentious thing, and I think why they're trying to get it done now. And it seems like the trade-off is going to be the players get a full year of service time, like, for playing this year. If they do play games, then like even if it's 80 games, 100 games, 120 games, they'll prorate it out as if it was the equivalent of a full season.
Well, the only thing we've heard is that players who are up the full year will get the full year of service time.
That's what I mean. But I thought
that's it. That's all it said.
Oh, really? Okay.
It said nothing of players who are not up for the full year.
Oh, okay.
So that's my point was that's not a significant concession. That's logical.
Oh, yeah, you're right. MLB is great. I just assumed it kind of.
No, the logical thing for both sides would be to just prorate it.
Yeah.
If you have a 90, so the normal season is 183 days.
86.
186 now?
I'm looking at it right now. Normal season
is it 172 is a full year of service time?
Correct.
Okay. So 186 days. If you have a 90-day season, just multiply everyone's service time by 2.
Yeah.
That's not hard, guys.
Yeah.
Come on. This is simple.
So I'm wondering though if the thing is like teams don't want to give up a year of service time for someone like in a pre-arb year for. Well,
and that's what I
games.
thought. But based on what we're hearing as well, and I guess this can bring us into the Ken Rosenthal article.
Yeah.
Is apparently, Ian, MLB has agreed if there is no season.
So worst case scenario,
if there is no season, that basically all the players would get the same amount of service time they got last year.
Yep.
Heading into the next year.
Yeah.
Which, to me, that is a very significant concession.
But I think your theory of why the owners would agree to that is correct.
And I think what it is they care more about getting out of paying the players this year.
Correct.
Than they do about service time. And to get back to one thing that was in the Passan article that I skimmed by accident, the teams have one of the things they're negotiating is that MLB is going to advance more than $150 million in salaries divided among 4 classes of players. That'd be first-timers on the 40-man roster, players with low salary split contracts, players with higher salary split contracts, and then players with guaranteed MLB deals. Salary split contracts would be like minor league free agents who get a deal that pays them one amount in the majors, one amount in the minors. If the season is canceled, that will be the only money the players get this year. If the season, they wouldn't need to be repaid, but that's all they're getting.
Yeah.
If the season winds up happening, that would be in advance against whatever they're going to make. So I think, a lot of what they're negotiating right now is kind of like Depends on what happens. Is there a year? When do we start? It's kind of hard to negotiate how much a player's going to get paid if you don't know when or if the season is starting. So they don't have those details yet. But, Ian, I mean, this report, I mean, let's talk about this and then we'll get into whatever else is in the Rosenthal article. But if there's no season, okay, and the service time, and that's what winds up happening with service time is players get what they got last year. Mookie Betts is a free agent.
Yeah.
I mean, presumably JD Martinez immediately jumps to his next opt-out.
Yep. Brandon Workman is.
All the new guys, basically. Colin McHugh. But yeah, there's a bunch of guys. I mean, essentially you have a bunch of guys jumping right to free agency, which is crazy. I'd be furious if I was the Dodgers, frankly, if I just traded 3 guys for half of Price's contract and Mookie Betts, and I don't get the benefit of Mookie Betts. But if apparently it's more, if it's worth more to the owners who are facing a multi-million-dollar, I mean, we're talking a 9-figure shortfall this year from not having games or potentially not playing games at home, not getting TV revenue. Potentially, they're going to have to work out those contracts. I mean, I'm assuming those contracts have a force majeure clause of some sort. But if their priority is not paying the players, that's why they're willing to concede that. And that's a significant concession.
Definitely. I mean, yeah, as you said, like Betts would be fascinating because if Betts is a free agent next year and he never played a game for the Dodgers, like, yikes. I mean, obviously it's not something you could foresee, but still.
And before everyone's like, oh man, Mookie Betts, lifetime Red Sox, keep in mind that another question that you run into if there's no season is what happens with the CBT.
Yeah.
Would the Red Sox reset? Because if they don't reset, are they willing to spend that money if JD Martinez doesn't opt out? Who knows?
Yeah. It's a fair question.
I mean, they would almost might screw the Red Sox in that sense.
Yeah.
And that if they really want to get under the cap, they're going to have to basically ask JD Martinez to opt out if they want to re-sign Mookie Betts. So Jackie Bradley's the other guy. Bradley's the other guy.
But that's if it resets, which we don't know yet, or what
that's what I'm saying. If it doesn't reset,
and that's why I think that's why all parties agree that they want to play as many games as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just better for the game, and not just from a yay baseball, apple pie, and Chevrolet. Like it's there are monetary reasons to play as many games as possible in front of as many people as safely possible on a TV audience. They're mostly financial. They're financial. The players only have so many years to do this. They want to get that year in. So. Yeah, all parties involved want to get out there, but it's just I would not bet money that they're going to play this year, man. I don't know about you. It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. What else does
I think? I would say that. Go ahead. I think that it's going to be hard to play, but I think they're going to do their best, even if it means it's only an 80-game truncated season. And if something like that happens, that would be fascinating because. Like, all bets are off in a season that short.
Well, then do you do expanded playoffs? Right?
Yeah.
Do you let more teams in with the understanding, like, look, it's more of a crapshoot, so we want to make sure more teams get into the playoffs. We'll have a longer playoff.
Yeah, so that would just be really interesting to me. So
I would love that. I would love that because it's basically like you're just doing a freebie year. Like,
yeah, it's like a video game year almost or something. I don't know. It'd be interesting.
It's like, what it almost kind of reminds me of? Like, one of the things that I've loved kind of learning about before, you've got family from England, is like the FA Cup is, the concept of it is really cool to me.
Yeah.
And for people, do you want to give people like the really quick lowdown on what the FA Cup is?
Sure. Yes,
I'm talking about the right one.
So basically the FA Cup is the English football structure. If you think of like the minor leagues, except every minor league organization is a separate entity. They're their own team. And they are competing against each other for promotion and relegation on to the Premier League, which is the highest division, which would basically be the equivalent of MLB. But unlike minor league baseball, or the way the FA Cup works is there's the 4 English leagues, which are the Premier League and then Championship, English League One and League Two, which are considered the league teams. Then there's an entire non-league structure, which goes all the way down to like the 10th division of football, and basically is the teams you see playing on a Sunday at the pub or at the park. It's non-league, part-time players.
It's like beer league softball.
Except you can move all the way up from the 10th division to the Premier League if your team is good enough. It just takes forever. You move up one division a year. But it is possible. And the FA Cup allows every team to enter. And it starts off with, those beer league teams, not beer league, but like, semi-pro pub teams playing against each other. And then slowly, the further you get in the competition, the higher up teams on the ladder get put in. And eventually you can run into situations where like non-league teams are playing Premier League teams in like the 5th round.
Yeah.
And so it just gives everyone a chance. And it's, one game, and you never know what's going to happen in one game, or if it's a draw, you get a replay. But it's kind of the same thing if like you have an 80-game season. It's just an all-out sprint. There's no holding back. There's going to be no pacing yourself because we've seen it before. Teams get off to hot starts and then die out after 100 games,
or vice versa. Man, I mean, like the Nationals probably don't make the playoffs if the season started. Weren't they like 20 and like 40 after May or something? Oh, they started the season horribly. I mean, from June 1st on, they were like, people don't realize like from June 1st on, they were like the first or second best team in baseball.
But up until that point, I'm pretty sure they were like...
they were terrible.
Yeah. So
I remember I looked up at one point in July, I was like, wait, they're good? Like, what?
Yeah.
Like,
so that's why it would just be a very interesting way because, we're kind of used to over 162 games. You don't read in a small sample sizes. Everything's going to level off. You hear about... Like, do you remember a couple years ago when Brian LaHare of the Cubs hit like 20-something home runs in the first half, or that Chris Shelton year with the Tigers?
Yeah.
Like, stuff like that would be an entire season. Mm-hmm. And so, like, one guy gets hot and he can carry you.
Yeah.
And so it's
he doesn't even need to be good.
No, and that's why it would just be it'd be just such an interesting dynamic.
Bonkers.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, what else is in the Rosenthal article, Ian?
The Rosenthal article, the main thing is just talking about the bet situation and the idea that they've kind of agreed that if there's no season, those guys are going to get declared free agents, or they're going to get the service time. And then it also just talks about how there still is they want to play as many games as possible, and kind of the ways they would make up for those games, what we discussed earlier, like double headers, reduction of off days during the All-Star break and during the extending the regular season. The things would kind of like make sense. If you're going to try and fit in as many games as possible, the schedule as it's currently constituted, you can't just start on, you can't cut the first 60 games or whatever, start on that day and just play it out like that. That won't work.
Right.
So, yeah, it was mostly that. The past article was a little more kind of touched on more things. And I think the other big thing that we haven't really talked about is like the minor leagues, because there isn't a lot of information out there about what's going to happen. Obviously, like the Red Sox are paying their have said they're going to pay, or MLB, I think, has agreed.
I think they're all getting paid at least what they would have gotten to the end of spring training.
No, but they had that other thing where they're going to get paid regular season what they would have made or something too, I believe. I thought I read that.
That's news to me.
I thought that was out there. Maybe just the Red Sox. I don't remember. There was something to do with paying the minor leaguers. I don't know if you want to look that up while I talk. But then I think the other big question with other than minor leaguers is what happens with the draft. Because we're seeing a lot of reports that if there's no regular season, owners don't want to pay player salaries, because the draft is about $400 million for every team worth of player salaries or bonuses. Sorry. And if there's no season, the owners don't want to be on the hook for having to pay that when they're not getting any revenue this year. And so, we've seen reports that maybe the draft won't happen. Maybe it'll be a truncated, 10-round draft. And it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with that, because I don't think I don't know how they can just cancel the draft, because you have, the college guys who are anticipating going pro this year. You have high school guys, and you're basically forcing them to miss a year of development. But at the same time, the union doesn't really care because none of them are union members. So they're not that concerned about that. So if they can get a concession elsewhere in return for, the draft, then they're going to do that. So I just think it's going to be really interesting to see kind of what happens with how minor leaguers are compensated for the time, what happens with the minor league season if the major league season gets going. Because if the major league season doesn't happen, there's not going to be a minor league season, obviously, so it doesn't matter. And then, what happens with the draft and the international periods that we're supposed to start up this summer?
Yeah. We in the Passan article, it says general managers say they believe minor leaguers who were not paid during spring training but will receive $400 allowances through April 8th will be, and I think that basically is their per diem.
Yeah.
Will be paid at rates similar to their expected salaries for the immediate future.
That's what I mean. That's what I thought, like the regular season, which is nothing though.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that's a drop in the bucket. But
yeah, but
still,
yeah.
And actually, the kudos to Emily Walden and Lindsay Adler, who've been out there advocating for minor leaguers. Emily's been getting them jobs. They created a minor league baseball player job board, basically.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy, but good for them for doing that work. Cause that's just a tough position. Cause it's you're getting sent home. You have no idea how long you're home for.
Well, and this is the thing.
What job are you going to get for 2 months?
They need to stay in baseball shape too.
Yeah.
And some of them obviously have the bonus they can fall back on, so it's not as big a concern for them.
Most of them don't.
But most of them don't. The majority of minor leaguers do not have a 6-figure bonus to fall back on or family money or something. They're kind of on their own, especially the guys from other countries. So
Right.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with them.
Right.
And then, the draft, I don't know if you want to touch on what the draft talked about. Because I think that's
well, so there was a question about whether or not they were going to have a draft. That's come up. Baseball America had an article about it the other day. I don't know how I think they need to have one. They'd be foolish not to have one. Clearly, you need to modify it somehow. But I guess I skipped this, but teams are balking at the expense that's usually spent on amateurs, particularly if they haven't started playing again by when the draft usually is, which was going to be on June 10th this year, because they were going to have it at the College World Series. But right now, high school seasons are canceled. College seasons are canceled. They're going to have, this isn't in the article, this is now me. You're going to have, if you have a draft, some kind of combine or workouts or something to scout these guys. I
mean, yes, and I think
teams have been scouting these players for a while. So we've touched on this in the past, with Mike Rickard even.
Yeah.
The scouting process for next year's draft begins immediately following that year's draft.
Right, and a lot of, even when you're scouting for last year's draft, you're seeing a lot of the underclassmen. You're scouting ahead.
When you go and see a college team, you're not ignoring the freshmen and sophomores.
Yeah. So right? I think they have a base on a lot of guys. The people I think it hurts are the ones who are the Northeast high school guys whose season never got going.
Yeah.
The cold weather college guys who only played a couple games, the guys coming back from injury. It's those guys who would have got scouted heavily in the April, May, even up until June months. Who now there's all, if they haven't played this year, you're going off fall ball last year. If they don't have fall ball, you're going off the summer. That's kind of where the question marks come in. And I think it could lead to, if they do have a draft, it's going to be the wild, wild west, because they're not going to have as much scouting information as they usually have. They're going to have a lot still, but not as much. And I think we could see some a situation where you have really talented guys falling because no one got to see them, and vice versa. And
it's going to be a very good test of team scouting departments.
Yes, I would agree.
It's going to be. I mean, it's going to be a crucible.
Yeah, and because I think I don't see how they can have one super draft. That just doesn't make sense to me, which would involve basically if they canceled this year's draft and just had next year's draft with all the players from this year in it also. That just doesn't seem fair to me at all.
And it's interesting because obviously the NCAA has said that this year's spring sports are going to have an extra year of eligibility.
Which creates it's a disaster for college
baseball. College baseball teams have 11 and 11.3 or 11.6 scholarships. I think it's 11.3.
Well, it's bad for
it's
all
11 and a
athletics.
fraction.
Yeah, but especially baseball.
Top programs who have next year's incoming class still coming in.
Yeah.
Don't necessarily want the seniors to stay in all cases.
No. Well, even think of it this way. If there's no draft, they're going to be getting those freshmen without anyone leaving.
Because none of them are getting drafted.
For a team like Vanderbilt, you didn't you get the top players in the nation, but you don't expect for all of them to come to campus.
How many transfers are you going to have?
Well, exactly, because they're giving out more scholarships than they have available, because they know that they're going to lose X players per year to the draft. If they're not losing those players to the draft,
They're going to have to pull scholarship offers.
What happens?
Yeah.
And similarly, if you're that high school player, do you risk going to college for a year and then you're stuck there for 3 years or 2 years, 3 years? Or do you just go to like a JUCO for a year so you're draft eligible again next year? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that would be a boon for the JUCOs.
Or are they just going to waive that requirement for next year only and just say like college freshmen are still draft eligible? Like there's a lot of logistical things with the draft that are going to be if they have to cancel it, which is why I think that they're going to do their best. And I think it was in the past an article they floated doing a 10-round draft.
It's not in here, man. I
might
know
not
you were
be in there.
talking about it.
Was.
You said it was a tweet.
Yeah, maybe I saw it. I saw it on Twitter, but some sort of shortened draft. But then it's like, does that mean that every player who's not drafted is a free agent? How does draft strategy change? What happens to the bonus pools? It's just there's a lot of questions, and frankly, we're not going to get a lot of answers until we know if there's baseball played this year.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I still think you need to have a draft. Like we've said, Ian, there has to be. You got to do something. The teams have been scouting these guys. Mm-hmm. It's not. I mean, yeah, you like some of the pop. Like, okay, for example, Andrew Benintendi. Does he get drafted if the 2015 college season doesn't happen?
Probably in like the 30th round.
Probably late, and he goes back to school.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of crazy to think about, but. I mean, it happens.
Yeah. It's going to be,
it'll be wild. It's we're going to stay on top of this. That's going to be another thing that when we do these episodes, there's going to be news every episode.
Yeah.
There's going to have to be, with what's happening. So, yeah.
We'll try to kind of discuss it and give you some reactions and what our thoughts on. And it's going to, as we've seen, like, stuff is changing by the day. What we say today or by the time this comes out might be, something else might have came out kind of clarifying something or changing it. It's a very fluid situation. I think it's going to be like that for the foreseeable future.
It is. It's going to be a very fluid situation, and stay tuned here and we'll stay on top of it for you. We put out a call for your emails. So let's get to those, Ian. I think we've already touched on a bunch of them. But, we'll go through what we can get through. And if we've already touched on it, then thanks for the email. And you can send us another one. Our first email today comes from Dave. Dave asks, can you tell me the dates and times the Red Sox host visiting minor league teams for games on the backfields? Thanks. The answer is no clue.
No, we did that last episode.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
All right, Alex wrote us a couple weeks ago, and he said, so it'll be interesting to read this. This was back on the 12th. Hi, guys. As I write this, the NBA has just suspended their season indefinitely. If MLB, and more specifically MILB, choose to suspend or even cancel their season, what effect do you foresee that having on prospect movement upwards towards the big leagues? Also, does a potential suspension / cancellation of the season and MLB's reaction as far as player development, MLB games taking place strictly at spring training facilities, for example, do anything to further their plans to reduce the size of the minor leagues going forward? A couple of very good questions from our friend Alex. Thanks, Alex. Let's start with the first one, Ian. This is a very good question. And I think if we asked Ben Crockett right now, he would say, I don't know. We're still figuring that out. What happens to player dev? And there are other questions that I'll read them. I don't have them cataloged right now, but that kind of get to this. What happens if there is a shortened season? What happens if there is a canceled season? As far as player dev, how do you promote guys? How do you what happens in that sense? It'll be fascinating.
I think that for me, the shortened season is a bigger impact on pitchers than hitters, because especially with guys you're trying to stretch out to become eventual starters.
Oh, true.
How do you make up those innings? A guy like Thad Ward, who is he's been on a really nice progression. First year in the system, he threw 63 innings in Central Florida his senior year, then 30 with Lowell. So he threw 90 innings 2 years ago. Last year, he bumped it up to 120. They were probably anticipating him throwing 150, 160 innings this year, kind of ramping it back up all the way, because they need to see if he can maintain his, velocity, stamina, et cetera, over the course of the year, stay healthy. And now, if they have a shortened season,
they have to play into the fall, man.
but he's only going to get 60 innings, 70 innings. And even if you play all the way into the fall, you have extended instructs, which is, I think, one of the things they would do is just have a full out instructional league, even if it was inter squad, and bring in more players and run more or less a second spring training is what I would guess they would do. I don't have any information, but it'd be I'd be very interested to hear what someone like Ben would say about that. Mm-hmm. Or maybe they send more guys to the AFL. They need to make up those innings somewhere, and I just don't know how you do that while still giving them an off season.
Arizona Fall League. Yeah.
I don't know, but my question is, how do you do that while still giving them the necessary time to rest in the off season for next?
Yeah, because that's the other thing too. I mean, like with Scott Boras just came out today with this plan that they'd get 162 or 144 game season and push everything back so that the World Series ends on Christmas.
I kind of think it's awesome, but at the same time, logistically, I don't understand how it would work at all.
It wouldn't, because think about it. The Boston Red Sox in 2019 were done in by what their pitchers did in October of the previous year.
And the season finished October 27th or something?
Yeah, it ends the last week of October.
Yeah.
If the season ends in December,
that's 2 months later.
You can't do it.
No, it doesn't give them enough time for the off season. Well, I think I saw an agent tweeted that out, was basically I would love to hear an explanation as to how pitchers are going to be expected to come with a season ended at Christmas, come back and throw 200 more innings the following year.
You couldn't do it. You're screwing 2 seasons over by doing that.
Yeah.
So I think what you've got to do is, think about this too. I mean, if we've talked about the major league season, Ian, we should talk briefly about the minor league season, because the timeline that we just talked about with the majors, for the minors, push that back 2 weeks.
Yeah, because they haven't even started, really.
They didn't even get started.
The only guys who had started were the ones who were in big league camp. I mean, they were doing informal workouts, but they weren't real workouts
yet.
No, the games were supposed to start the week we were going to go down.
Yep. And so consider that they start 2 weeks later under normal circumstances with a shortened spring training. Major league teams are going to want to get their major league guys in there and ready for the season. That's going to be top priority.
Well, and this is the other factor that I think you need to consider is for public health. They're probably not going to want the additional 200 minor league players running around down there while they're trying to get their big leaguers ramped up. Do you know what I mean?
And by the way,
we should mention that too.
Yeah.
But that's just an additional risk because even if the season starts or they start ramping things back up end of May, beginning of June, all the top public health experts have said that it's not going to be completely eradicated by then.
Right.
So that's just an additional risk that I have a feeling, I think you're right, they would wait until the major league guys are out of there before they bring the minor league guys back in.
And probably a good spot to point out, the Red Sox confirmed that one minor leaguer has tested positive for COVID-19.
Correct. That was reported yesterday, I believe.
Yeah, yesterday. They believe, based on the timeline, the player left Fort Myers on the 15th, and the positive test was Monday.
Yeah.
The 23rd. So they think based on the timeline, he got sick back at home.
Correct.
It's an international player, I believe.
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure they said it's an international player.
But I know that they said they've shut down Fenway South for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. They've sent, because I think the article said that 10 to 15 players were still working out there. They've sent all of them home.
Because Sale lives in Fort Myers,
right? And I know several other players live in Fort Myers,
right?
Thad Ward's from down there. I know Jake Room has a place down there. Other guys live down there. So, yeah. So it's going to be interesting. Well, that's happened, and then obviously the Yankees have had a few cases. I know of the Reds. I believe had a front office member get it. I want to say.
Really, I don't know. Josh Moore, the Red Sox. Yeah. Oh, sorry, the Paw Sox.
His Twitter thread is, I think, a pretty good sum of what's going on right now. It's not an easy read.
Yeah. So,
but yeah, no, it's
you should read that if you don't think this is a big deal.
Yeah. But anyway, so what was the second part of his question? I think the
second part was does do anything to further their plans to reduce the size of the minor leagues going forward? That plan has to do with, as we've talked about, the end of the. What the heck's the agreement called? The professional baseball agreement?
Oh, that's a good question. What happens with that? Does that get pushed a year?
Well, no. The agreement ends when it ends. I would think it's like the CBA. The CBA ends when it ends.
Yeah, so
I don't see why that wouldn't be under the same sort of situation.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't think it would change that. If anything, I feel like they would want like more. They want to get as many guys playing as possible, as often as possible to make up for games. So,
right. But yeah, I don't think any plans to reduce the size of the minor leagues going forward would change. I mean, if anything, heck, you might have natural selection. Some organizations might go under because they're not going to make any money this year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, like,
that's a very good point.
Dude,
we should mention.
You think the Brooklyn Cyclones are hosting many games this year?
We should mention
Probably
that.
Not.
Like minor leagues are in a lot of
they're in trouble.
The major leagues are in trouble, but the owners at the end of the day, they'll be able to make that money up. Minor league teams are run on such shoestring budgets, a lot of them, that I don't know how they're going to be able to recover from this. If
you have ever considered buying like minor league merch, now is a great time to do it.
Yeah,
because those organizations could use that money right now to pay their employees, the ones that have full-time employees and don't just run on college interns.
Correct.
They could use the money right now.
Because those teams do not have the huge operating budgets, or the majority don't have the super wealthy owners.
Yep.
Like, it's going to be very interesting what happens when it comes back, especially too, because I was thinking about this. Like, if minor league baseball comes back and they're not allowed to have fans in, how exactly are they going to pay for? Because minor league baseball, the majority of the money they get is off concessions and merch. Tickets are so cheap. It's the concessions is where they get you. Yep. There's no fans coming in. How are they going to be able to?
That's how they get paid.
No, but that's what I mean. Yeah, but you know, and that and advertising, obviously. But if there's no fans, how are the advertising sponsorship deals going to work?
Well, and it's like they're obviously not going to employ anybody to work in the park other than security.
So it's just like the whole thing is just really. Yeah.
That's a whole other can of worms. Basically, MLB and the MLBPA needs to get their issues sorted out first. Yeah. And then MLB is going to have to pivot to the minor leagues. That alone might push back minor league spring training.
There might have to be like legitimately a minor league bailout, because I just don't know how they're going to have the money to make up for this shortfall.
Yeah. But that's another thing we're going to have to keep an eye on, because that's going to be fascinating going forward. Mm-hmm. Bit of news we should talk about. Congrats to friend of the site, Mike Antonellis.
Yes.
Who got the promotion to AAA Pawtucket.
Yes. Well deserved.
I know he's been going after that for a minute, so good for him.
Been the voice of the Sea Dogs for a long time.
He's been there for a decade. Been there for a decade. Going up to AAA Pawtucket. Congratulations, Mike.
And congratulations to Mike Monaco, who was with Pawtucket and now is heading up to the big leagues. Going to be filling in on NESN a decent amount this year.
Yes.
So as someone who was with the Paw Sox, that's a really nice move for him too.
Yep.
He's also a friend of the site, so wanted to give him a shout out.
Yes, definitely. Yes, shout out to Mike.
Welcome. Both Mikes.
Yep. Yeah. Right. Welcome to Emma Tideman. Or I think that's how you pronounce it. The new Portland Sea Dogs play-by-play announcer.
Mm-hmm. We have a new Salem announcer too, because Melanie Newman is off to the Orioles.
Did they announce who the Salem one is yet?
Yeah, some guy.
It's some guy.
Well, I have the press release. I just don't have it in front of me right now.
Come on, I forgot about that. They did announce that. I'm sorry, new guy.
Let me see if I can find it.
Gregory Wong.
Yep.
Congrats to Gregory Wong, who joins the Salem Red Sox. Welcome to Emma and Gregory. Congrats to Melanie Newman, who jumped straight from high A to Baltimore.
Yeah, she was in Double A for a bit, but still, that's pretty impressive.
But she wasn't the lead. I don't think she was the lead in Double A.
I don't know, but I know
because I remember she was talking about Salem was her first
full-time
play-by-play gig.
Well, now she's up with Masson, so that's pretty impressive, pretty cool.
Well, I think she's doing radio too.
Yeah.
That's sick. I mean, she's good. I mean, what was it, May of this past year that Mike was like, she ain't going to be around long?
Yeah.
She's good too. So congrats to all that.
And I think there's actually, I don't know why we didn't mention this before. The Red Sox finished a trade for a player that is actually kind of prospect relevant. And we probably should talk about that too.
Minute 49.
Yeah. It's just with how much it was going on, it's kind of slipped under the radar, but we actually have a scouting report going up on the site. So, probably tomorrow, it'll be up.
Yeah,
by the time you listen to this, it'll be up.
The Red Sox completed their trade for Travis Lakins, getting catcher Johnny Pareda.
Which is funny because Travis Lakins isn't even on the Cubs anymore.
I know. He was there for 2 days.
Yeah.
That stings.
But
my guess, Ian, is the Red Sox had a list of guys to scout in minor league spring training, and then they just picked one.
But Pareto is a 23-year-old signed out of Venezuela. He's been with the Cubs since 2013.
Well, he signed out of Venezuela like at 16.
Yeah, but he's been with the Cubs since 2013.
Right.
And his best year was 2 years ago. Sorry, 2018 in the Carolina League, where he hit 272, 347, 363.
And that offseason, he was like in the 20s on their top 30s.
Yeah, he was seen as like a solid, like potential up and down defense first catcher. No power at all, no speed. Receiving is inconsistent, framing is inconsistent based on what I've talked to scouts about him. Best tool is his arm. That was 60. Everyone I talked to said it was a 60.
I've read mostly 60s, and I think I read 170.
But yeah, everyone I talked to said 60. He's got a pretty good eye at the plate, doesn't strike out a lot, and he actually walks a decent amount. So that's, he's got his OBP split's really nice. But there's just no power. Like this year he had 241, 336, 305. But I like the acquisition just because I talked about it on Twitter when they have no catching depth.
Yeah. He becomes their second or third at worst.
Yeah, it's Connor Wong, Pareda, Cole Cottom, and then, a bunch of lottery tickets. Like Diaz. I know Naisbal Marcano down in who's going to be in the GCL this year, got some pub coming out of the DSL.
Maybe.
But yeah, it's just a bunch of question marks. So it's good to have another solid catch and throw guy up in the high minors.
Yep. Yeah, welcome to the system.
And we'll have his scouting report posted on the news page by the time you read this, so check it out there.
By the time you read this podcast.
Or you listen to the podcast.
Our next question comes from Aaron. Aaron, this one is 12 days old. Hoping I'm not too late for the post-shutdown mailbag. As of right now, we don't have clarity on this, and I'm kind of assuming we won't by the time you record it, but I'm wondering about service time tracking. Is there any precedent during the strike year maybe for a league shutdown impacting what does and doesn't count for service time? Especially with things like Super 2 or where someone was called up last year and only threw a few innings, so technically could still undergo service time manipulation to get an extra year. Whether these first 2 weeks or longer of a delay count for service time could matter a lot. It's a good point. Beyond the question of what is decided on that, I'm wondering who decides it. Is it MLB laterally? Do they need to sort it out with the MLBPA, have an arbiter get involved? Heck, how would this impact arbitration rulings at the major league level, given that we saw Chris Bryant try and sue his service time down, or up, I guess. Not having this clearly delineated in the CBA could set up years of legal action. No, this is probably pretty murky, but appreciate any thoughts you have. Best, Aaron. We've talked about a lot of that, Ian. Obviously, it's a negotiation.
Yeah.
It's collective. It's a collective bargaining issue.
I think it's something we'll have more clarity on the next coming days because it seems they're pretty committed to figuring out the situation by like the end of this week, and that's why all these
the Passan article said that there was a Wednesday deadline.
Yeah, but that came and passed. I think the deadline they said was opening day, which is technically tomorrow. So
right.
Yeah, right. So I think we'll know more probably. So check back with us next time. We'll have a better idea.
Yeah, and as far as historical precedent, that's something that I thought about. But if you think about what the last strike was 94, they haven't had a labor stoppage since then, right? I don't think so. Yeah. No. So if you think about 94, how many CBAs ago was that? You know what I mean? It's just like, because I've been wondering, like, what's the precedent from that? What did they do with service time then? I'm not quite sure. I mean, I guess it was a player strike. So MLB's not going to be like, hey, you guys had a strike. Here's some service time. Like, they're kind of giving up the service time. There wasn't a lockout since then? Okay, I guess not.
No.
But yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot of precedent. So, yeah. Next question. Thanks for the email, Aaron. Our next question comes from... okay, I'm going the wrong direction here. What the heck? Okay. This comes from our patron, Kyle Costigan. Kyle asks, hey guys, hope you and yours are well and safe. For my question, of the players in the 40 to 60 range in the prospect rankings, who do you think has the best odds of jumping into the top 20 by season's end? Or at the very least, poised to take the biggest leap up the rankings from the back end? Appreciate you guys. Thanks, Kyle. We kind of answered this last time, Ian.
And I'm going to say you should wait because we will be answering it in an upcoming content series on the website and in upcoming podcasts where we talk about sleepers at every position who are both in the rankings and out, who could move up significantly.
Fair.
So I'm going to tease, and we're not going to answer it here.
Okay, cool. Because the other thing that I was going to say is what I'm curious about is how does this situation change that, right? It's almost like less likely it's a pitcher at this point. Or is it more likely because you get 60 great innings? And
I don't. Yeah, it's a good question. We'll see.
Who knows? Our next question comes from Kevin. And Kevin says, hey, guys, I hope you are staying healthy during these unusual times. My question is, how do you think the 2020 quote-unquote season will be counted towards an individual player's service time? We talked about that.
Yep.
If no games are played in 2020, will someone like Mookie Betts be a free agent? We talked
Seems
about
that way.
Will players who are about to play their second year of arbitration stay on the same contract /ARB year in 2021, or will it be treated as if a season was played? That's another good question. Like, do you start that whole process all over again? You know, do you get another arbitration contract? That's something we didn't mention. It's a good question. We don't know. They're still figuring that out. I know you guys aren't making the decision, but curious what you think will happen if there are other factors, and I'm sure there are, that I'm not thinking of that will come into play. Yeah, I mean, there's so many moving pieces to this that I don't think anybody, you know, it's a lot to get your head around, and there's going to be a lot of discussion of that coming up. Our next question comes from Ethan. He says, thanks for all you guys do. Before the Betts trade, the Sox system was regarded as being a bottom 5 system in the league. After acquiring Wong and Downs, where would you rank the system now? Also, who are some high upside guys in the low minors who could be big risers in the rankings over the next couple of years? Thanks again for all you guys do, Ethan. We're skipping the sleeper high upside guys.
We got a lot of time to kill over the next couple of weeks, months. So we'll be talking a lot about that and writing about it. So check it out there.
Yeah, we talked about the ranking of the Red Sox system last time. I mean, It seems like the consensus has been around 20 to 25. Well, I mean, both like Kylie had them down in like at 27.
Yeah, I think 20 to 25.
Yeah, 20 to 25 sounds about right to me.
Well, because the way Kylie does it is going to inherently hurt the Red Sox because they don't have anyone in the high minors who's worth a lot of the like dollars. The way they do it, like it puts a surplus of comes from like high minors, good prospects, which they don't have that many of. Their depth is, I will be touching on next week, is a lot of it's in the low minors.
Right. Our next question comes from friend of the site, Matthew Corey. Matt asks, hey guys, you may have discussed this already, but Biff not what happens to the draft this year. We went on that. We already talked about that. On the one hand, the situation we're in severely disadvantages teams from accurately scouting players, but on the other hand, it severely disadvantages them all equally. Do teams just make their picks with the knowledge they've accumulated over the past few years and live with it, or do they postpone the draft and have a double draft next year? Do they push it back? Thanks as always for the insight. Yeah, we talked about that. I don't think you can have a double draft. I think they've got to have the draft this year. Next question comes from Matthew. Do you ever see minor leaguers having enough leverage to create a union, allowing for better rights for the players?
It's a good question.
It's a great question. It's not a baseball question, really. That's just a labor question.
That would be a fun one to have, like one of the labor expert lawyers on to discuss.
I mean, maybe that's a question we can bring like Mike McCann on.
That's what I was thinking of.
Because I mean, here's the problem, right? Is that they're even more transitory than major league players. You know what I mean? There's no like 15-year veteran of the minor leagues to be a foreman. Like that's part of the problem. And the guys I think what you're going to start seeing is that major league players are going to start being a little bit more. It seems like they're a little more woke to the plight of minor leaguers at this point.
Instead of in the last CBA where they just kind of threw them under the bus to get everything they could, I think they're starting to realize that, all of them
short-sighted
start in the minors at some point, and it impacted them or impacted their future peers. So,
next question comes from Mike. Mike says, good afternoon, guys. Hope you're safe and healthy. Here are a few questions. Feel free to use as many or as few as you'd like. One, over your time on the site, you've watched a number of players develop across the system. Unlike the majority of fans, you've also gotten to know a lot of these guys personally. What players' failure to develop into major leaguers have disappointed you the most? What players are you most bummed about not making it because they were just cool people outside of their prospect status? And I'll stop reading there so we can answer that question. We don't get to know them as personally as you would think. I mean, this isn't like a Section 10 thing where like Carabas becomes best buds with these guys. I've met a few from sitting in the stands. I don't do interviews anymore, just because I don't have time to write. We watch games from the stands from an impartial perspective. We're not necessarily like going back and doing the post game interview.
Yeah, I've never been into a clubhouse in the minor leagues, like inside the clubhouse. So it's just, I don't the only time I ever interact with them is like if the pitchers are charting, they ask me a question or something.
Yeah, and we'll see them in like spring training a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, like, and I mean, I've talked to a few on just randomly about different things, but a lot of the time, honestly, it's not to do with baseball when we're talking. So
yeah, and I've interviewed some guys, in the past off field. I mean, one of the first guys that I ever interviewed was Clay Meredith. And maybe that's probably my answer is, I mean, the guy gave me an hour and a half before a game once in Pawtucket. It was pretty bummed to see the way that went. I thought could have been a future closer, or at least like a long-term setup guy. He had like a couple really good seasons in the Padres bullpen, but other than that, it didn't really go anywhere. So that's just more because that's back when I was really in full journalist mode. These days, I don't have time to write, so I'm not going to waste the guy's time if I'm not going to write up quotes. I might try and do a little bit more of that if there are games this year. Just going into the locker room after the game, talking to coaches, talking to players, and just kind of getting the scoop. But it's kind of tough when you're, there's journalism, and then there's kind of what we do in terms of scouting players, grading them, writing reports. It's just such a different thing. It's kind of tough to merge the two. Next question. What is the single biggest misunderstanding that most prospect geeks make when following their favorite team's system? What should we stop paying attention to? What should we pay attention to that we're missing? Ian, anything come to mind for you? I know a few things come to mind for me.
Minor league statistics.
Well, specifically what?
Power, speed. Their speed's probably the biggest one.
Huh?
What?
I'm confused. What do you mean by that?
I just think minor league stats you should not pay attention to at all. I don't think they tell you anything, for the most part. I
think that's a gross overgeneralization.
I don't feel like going deeper, so I'm just going to generalize with it.
Or do you have somewhere to be, man? Come on.
No. I just think minor league statistics...
There are misleading minor league statistics, I agree with you. I think you are grossly overgeneralizing.
I mean, I don't know. I just I don't really care how a guy's performing, especially with pitchers in the minor leagues. There are certain things I look for. Like I'm going to look for strikeout rate, walk rate, but I don't care about minor league ERA. I don't care about minor league WHIP. I don't care about wins and losses, obviously. Wins and losses is probably the big.
Don't care about those in the major leagues. I think people are smart enough not to look at wins and losses in the minors. But I think what we get are to me, I think the major caveat I would put that is statistics out of context.
Yeah,
because
I guess
context matters a lot. Because
that's a better way to say
when a 25-year-old is crushing low A, no, he is not a prospect. Leave me alone.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point.
When you've got an 18-year-old who's not playing well in low A, and you're asking me why he's still ranked, well, it's because he's 18 and he should still be in high school, right?
Yeah.
That's the difference. There are also certain stats that matter more than most, like you said. But the one stat that I think that people grossly overemphasize, even when they're kind of like the woke baseball fan, walks. Hitter walks. Don't care. I don't care. Because it could just mean that he's watching a bunch of pitches because he's completely overmatched.
I remember Andrew Benintendi. People were worried because he came to Lowell, and I think he walked only a few times, and he struck out a decent amount.
Right.
And I remember watching him, and you could just tell he just did not care about walking at all. He was just going up there and just swinging. I'm just getting my hacks in. I'm going back to the dugout, or I'm going on base. I do not want to walk. I do not care. It is not a concern of mine. And that's just my walk numbers are weird. You don't know how bad the pitching is they're facing. Right. The umpires are frankly terrible. A lot of them are in the low, especially in the low minors. It's just for hitter walks, you just can't. You don't really know.
And so then for pitchers, base runners, hits, walks, not walks, but hits. Sometimes team defenses stink. Sometimes,
well, it's also the scoring is atrocious. There's so many plays that that's an error if it's in the major leagues, but they rule it a hit because it's the minors.
Yeah,
because it's hometown scoring. But I do think that the context thing is important because there's a very big difference between 8 home runs in the Carolina League and 8 home runs in the California League for the same player.
That's the other thing. So playing environments.
I remember Xander Bogart, it was Devers hit 10 home runs in Salem, and we were his power's 70. That's insane power. And I remember people telling me you're an idiot. He had 10 home runs in an entire season. How is that possible? And it's Salem is you cannot hit in the Carolina League. There's no power in the Carolina League. 10 home runs is a ton. But then you compare that with back when the Red Sox had Lancaster, you had guys like Bubba Bell, Zach Diegas, Jeff Corsoletti, like hitting like 25 plus home runs. And it's just like power numbers in the minors. You just can't like read too much into it. I mean,
Corsoletti played in Wilmington, I'm pretty sure, but
who's the other guy I'm thinking of? It was Bubba Bell, Zach Diegas, and
Zach Diegas, the first baseman, the first baseman was Aaron Bates.
Yeah, but there was one more outfielder.
The second baseman was Tony Granadillo.
There's one more outfielder who I'm thinking of.
I don't think there was an outfielder.
No, there was, because I remember when we back in like the early days, we did like a minor league fantasy game. He went in the first round.
All right. Well, you can look that up.
I'm going to look right now.
To me, it's league context you should pay attention to.
Oh, Reed Engel. Reed Engel.
But he wasn't actually good.
No, but I remember he was
one of the guys Laura was telling us we were way too low on.
Oh yeah, Corsoletti didn't play. You're right. Corsoletti
played in Wilmington. Yep.
Yeah, you're right.
I know I'm right. And then the final question Mike had, are there any examples of guys you saw who would become major league regulars that you had written off as org guys at some point? Appreciate it. Be safe, Mike. Daniel Nav is the guy that comes to mind.
I never saw him. That was before my time.
Well, it's not that. I mean, I guess he said guys you saw. I don't know that I saw him. It was more that I was telling people like, guys, they signed these guys out of indie ball and they don't. Like, who cares? He's 27.
Yeah, I do think that is a misnomer though. Like, what is the definition of a regular? Do you know what I mean? Because like the definition of a regular to like a baseball person or a scout is going to be different than what a regular person thinks. Because like a major league regular Rule 50, you've got to be like, you have to start and hold down a starting position for several years. You know what I mean? There are a bunch of guys who come up and start for 1 year who like might be a regular for that 1 year. Like I think Travis Shaw is a good example of that. Came up and was a regular for 2 years, but I wouldn't call him like a major league regular. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, the jury's out on him.
He's a platoon guy to me. So I just think it's like the definition of a regular is it depends how you view it.
Right. Our final question comes from Thomas, Tom. Tom asks, does this impact how players will be placed at the beginning of the season? For example, take Thad Ward. Is he getting sent to Salem to get his feet wet again when sending him to Portland may have been a bit of a stretch with the season not starting smoothly? Fair question. I don't know. It could.
I think, I mean, I would assume if the major leagues are going to do expanded rosters, the minor leagues would probably do the same thing. So I think it would push guys up, if anything.
Well, no, because I think a lot of the expansion would be guys who would be getting cut or on the phantom DL.
Maybe that's a good point. But I just think if they're taking a couple extra, for pitchers at least, if they're taking a couple extra arms in the majors, you have to make up for that somewhere. I guess they always carry extra pitchers, but... Which
leads us to his other question, which is clubs in the past have taken advantage of the Atlantic League, and I actually supplement that by saying the independent leagues, including the American Association, as a way to supplement their depth. Will we expect there to be a higher demand for players from the indie leagues to help throughout the season to manage issues that arise?
Well,
possibly.
It depends on if the indie leagues survive, because you want to talk about budget issues. That's true. Another one. Like, it's not like they're playing right now, so...
That's a great point. And the thing is, I think you'll see teams keep more guys. I mean, take us, for example, we were talking last time about the number of guys that are at like that AAA level.
Yeah.
If two more are going to be in the majors... Say they expand the AAA roster, that's two more guys. That's four guys that would have been cut.
Yeah,
that now have jobs.
I'm just looking at it right now, and they didn't ever get to the minor league like cut phase of camp. You know what I mean?
No. I mean, they cut some guys just before camp.
But like camp,
they cut some guys in January. But
usually in camp after like the first two weeks or so, they'll cut 5-10 guys. Who it's just, we're not going to put you on an affiliate this year. Like, good luck. Maybe you can find another team.
Yeah, you cut them early so that they have a better chance to catch on elsewhere.
Maybe you don't cut those guys now because, you haven't cut them now. And if they make it through, you might need them during the season now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at our projections right now, we have a lot of guys who put them in blue because they're fighting for a roster spot. Pull a bunch of those guys up onto the regular roster. I mean, that's what winds up happening.
Yeah, like guys like Tom Windle, Andrew Schwab, like the minor league kind of orgy guys. There's no point in cutting them now if you're going to need those extra arms.
Yeah.
Especially if the minors go the route of, because I think the minor leagues, actually, I was just thinking about this as we were recording. It would be a lot easier for them to make up the games than it is for Major League, because you just do 7-inning doubleheaders, and they're used to that anyway. And
but are they going to do that, though?
That's the question. That's what I'm wondering. But if they do that, I think they would be able to find the pitching and everything. It would be a little easier.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing is, like looking at the Red Sox alone, at every level, they probably could run a 6-man rotation.
Yeah. They've done it before.
Because you take the piggyback guys.
Yeah. They could run a 6-man rotation, and they also...
Bullpen day.
They'll do bullpen day, but they also carry extra pitchers on the Phantom DL all the time. So now you just keep those guys active and you add the guys that would be cut as the new Phantom DL guys. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like they could find enough minor leaguers to do that.
Yeah, and depending on when the draft happens relative to the season.
Well, that's the other thing. If they push the draft back, what happens to like Lowell? Does that get started? Do the guys who would be ticketed to Lowell, do you send some to just Greenville? Like
they've got a full Lowell roster already.
Well, that's what I mean, though. Like that's a good point. But like a lot of teams won't have that. So yeah.
I mean, it all goes together, and these are all things we're going to keep our eye on.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, thank you for the questions, everybody. Again, podcast@soxprospects.com. We want to talk about what you want to hear about, and we got plenty of time to do it. So get your questions in. We're going to keep going. I think that's it, Ian. We're going to keep doing this, man. I wish we had been able to go last week to Fort Myers, but unfortunately it wasn't to be. So, everybody, stay with us. We'll keep going if you're going to keep listening. So, we want to thank Podcast Joe 2.0. Make sure you follow us on Twitter. Follow the site account @SoxProspects. Follow me @SP Chris Hatfield. And you can follow Ian @Ian Cundall. That's IANCUNDALL. Everybody be safe. Everybody stay healthy. Stay home.
Yes.
No
please.
matter what certain people in certain positions of importance may be telling you. Mm-hmm. Stay home for real. It's not worth it. Don't do anything stupid. All right, y'all?
Be safe. We'll talk to you next week.
No, next week or the week after. I don't know. We're still figuring out the schedule. I think weekly might get a little aggressive.
I don't know.
Let's say next episode. We've got time. The question is, are we going to be done the things we want to do by then?
Good point.
So, keep an eye on the news page. We've got content coming there. That's news.soxprospects.com.
And follow us on Twitter.
I already said that.
@SoxProspects.
Yes. Said that already, but it's fine. Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Be back at you soon.